You will place your fabric squares right sides up between the dotted placement lines. You will now fuse the squares to your interfacing panel. Make sure the squares stayed in place. Use a Teflon or applique sheet to keep the glue off your iron. Press rather than moving your iron around to prevent your squares from moving. No need to use any steam since you are using a Teflon sheet. You now have 4 panels with your squares fused to them. Next, we will sew them. For each fused grid section, fold the panel on the dotted fold lines between the fabric squares. Stitch no less than 1/4 inch seam allowance, using 2.0 millimeters stitch length. When stitching, make sure to use a stitch length of 2.0. Clip between each fabric square to the stitching line. Make sure you don't clip your stitching. This will allow the seams to be pressed in the opposite directions in the next step. Press the seams in each row in the direction of arrows indicated on the interfacing. Pressing each row in the opposite direction. The seams pointing in the opposite directions on each row. Fold and stitch the long seams, minding the pressing of the short seams, making sure the seams are nested nicely. I like to use a stiletto to help me pointing the seams in the right direction. Now your first panel is completed. I like to give it a nice press. Only 3 more to go. After you completed your 4 outer panels, we'll set them aside for now. You have 4 lining panels and 4 stabilizer panels. 1 lining panel is longer, so we can create a slip pocket. You will fold the longer panel by matching the top of the raw edge with the stabilizer and the bottom with the stabilizer, creating a slip pocket. Pin or clip and sew along the raw edges of all panels. This is what your pocket panel looks like. You will continue with the rest of the 3 panels by matching the raw edges and stitching around all 4 sides. Place lining right side up on the stabilizer and stitch around the edges. All 4 of our lining panels are completed. We will set them aside for later. Pin 2 grid sewn section with the right sides together, matching the bottom center squares. Sew from the bottom center to the end, creating an L shape. Repeat with the other 2 panels to create 2 identical L units. Clip or pin into place. Stitch from bottom center to end of the interlocking seams. After sewing the panels together, you created a L shape. You will repeat this same process with your other two panels. Arrange your two L units so the bottom center squares meet in the center. The four squares will meet in the bottom center of your bag. Pay attention to your squares to nest the seams nicely. You have now created a windmill shape with your panels. That is why this bag is often called the windmill bag. Now you have your panels all sewn together. We are creating the 3D effect. You will now fold your panels right sides together along the dotted line on the bottom. Make sure your squares line up and the seams are nesting nicely. Clip or pin the panels together. You will now stitch the panels together on the bottom. You now created the first bottom corner of your bag. We will continue to do this with the rest of the panels. Continue to stitch your bottom of the panels together until you created your bag bottom. Once you stitched all four sides, you finished your outer shell of the bag. Make your handles with foam stabilizer, laying the foam on the bottom, next the lining right side up, and the main fabric handle main side down on top. Clip into place and stitch around three sides of the handle. Leave one side open to turn the handle. Now we are turning out handles right side out. There are several options for turning tools. This yellow one is my favorite. I bought it at Stitched in Shirts and asked myself, how did I ever do without it? It is a game changer. I give my handles a nice press and top stitched along the sides. Don't forget to match your thread to your fabric. Now it is time to attach our handles to the outer shell. Pin the handles to bag right sides together. Stitch across the handle stitching line indicated on your interfacing. Stitch across the handle stitching line on your interfacing. Attach the other side of your handle, making sure your handle is not twisted. We are creating the windmill shape with our lining panels just like we did with our outside panels. Lay them in a L shape and stitch them together. Create two L shapes and then stitch them into the windmill shape. Now we are turning our lining into the 3D shape, just like we did with the outer shell we stitched the sides together. You take your sides of the lining panels and clip them together, stitch along the seam and repeat with the other three sides. Just like we did with the outer shell. When stitching the sides together, make sure you leave an opening to turn your bag later. I leave about 6 to 8 inches. I mark the opening with a marker. Stitch on both sides of my markings. I backstitch very well since we are pulling the bag through this opening. Insert the lining into the bag, right sides together. Match the raw edges. Pin well and ease the edges as necessary. Stitch across the handles over or slightly below the previous stitches. Pivot and continue stitching. Clip the inner corners. Make sure your handles are out of the way. Now you take it to your machine and stitch around the top. Now we stitched around the top of the bag. We stitched across the previous stitch lines of the handles. It is time to turn our bag. You will reach inside through the opening we left in the lining. Grab your main fabric and pull it through the opening. This is why backstitching was so important at the opening. It is a workout. Keep going, you can do it. Now we push the lining back into the inside of the bag. Push your lining inside of your bag and finger press the top edge. Top stitch around the top edge of your bag. The opening where we turned the bag can be hand-stitched or sewn by machine. I am adding an acrylic stabilizer to the bag. It gives the bottom great stability. I love how this bag comes together. Repeat this for your second handle.